Good afternoon and welcome to the fifth edition of Steelwinds Engage, an interactive webinar series that facilitates intensive discussion on the evolving dynamics of the steel and steelmaking raw materials industries, with in-depth focus on the forces reshaping the sector globally. Our focus is to unlock the futuristic trends in the global and domestic steel industries and extend our gaze beyond the immediate and the obvious. The topic for this session is Karnataka's iron ore industry tracing the changing matrix, which is, of course, one of the most important topics of discussion in India's iron ore industry today. Stability is slowly returning to the iron ore mining industry in Karnataka after a period of deadlock following the Supreme Court's landmark verdict in mid 2022, which lifted restrictions on sales and exports of iron ore from the state. Iron ore supplies in Karnataka are expected to rise in the coming time, with e-auctions remaining the preferred mode of sales for transparent price discovery, according to many market participants, while it is also expected that the volume of direct sales will grow simultaneously. To explain the evolving dynamics of the iron ore and pellet industries in Karnataka, we have the pleasure of extending a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists today, Mr. Tanveer Ahmed, Managing Director of Minera, and Mr. Vigneshwaran, Deputy GM, MSPL. Welcome to both of you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would also like to welcome my co-moderator for this session, Mr. Vaibhav Dubey of Steelman. So, to initiate proceedings, I request Vaibhav to deliver his short presentation on the topic, post which we would go straight to the question answer session. But before we start, I would like to invite the audience to share their queries in the chat box, which we would directly take up with the experts in today's session. So with these initial words, I now request Vaibhav to start his presentation. Over to you, Vaibhav.
Okay. Thanks, Nirmalya, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be giving a brief overview of the changing market dynamics in Karnataka's iron ore and pellet industry. But before moving ahead with the presentation, let me give you a brief overview of Steelmint. With over 600 price assessments and 500 data sets, Steelmint has emerged as a leading market intelligence firm over the last decade. Can we have next slide, please? Karnataka's iron ore production is expected to reach around 39 million ton in CY23 against 35 million ton seen in CY22. Thanks to the lifting of curbs on sales and exports by the Supreme Court, which also raised the annual iron ore production ceiling in the state. As we all know, last year, Supreme Court raised the iron ore production ceiling in the state from 35 to 50 million ton from the A and B category mines. The production cap in Bellary was raised to 35 million ton from 28 million ton, while in Chitradurg, the ceiling was raised to 15 million ton from the erstwhile 7 million ton. Talking about the status of block auctions, nearly 40 iron ore mines have been put under hammer since 2016, out of which nearly 10 have turned operational. Hence, it seems there is need for expediting the clearance processes for iron ore blocks won in the Karnataka auction. Iron ore e-auction sales volumes have seen a drop amid market players shifting their preference to direct sales. Back in 2011, if we recall, the Supreme Court issued a ruling to prohibit mining operations in Bellary after the Central Empowered Committee report, which was formed by the Supreme Court, raised awareness of the widespread breaches in mining. The Supreme Court further restricted the export of iron ore pellets from Karnataka. It also mandated that the monitoring committee to conduct electronic auctions for iron ore sales. In May 2022, the Karnataka government issued guidelines that allowed miners to sell iron ore through direct contracts or spot sales, as well as e-commerce platforms such as MSTC. Few of the miners that are seen going for auction route include NMDC, KSMCL, SMUR, while many of them are seen adopting a mixed approach. Before concluding the presentation to some recent developments in Karnataka region, let's see the Karnataka iron ore e-auction prices. Moving ahead to the recent developments that have resulted in hike in exports, the Supreme Court on 20 May 2022 lifted curbs on exports of iron ore from Karnataka and eased all restrictions on sales from the districts of Bellary, Chitradurg and Tumkur, where mining activity had been prohibited following environmental violations in 2011. Iron ore and pellet exports from southern India, Krishnapatnam and Mangalore ports have risen to 5.5 million ton during Jan to November 23 versus 1 million ton in corresponding period last year. That is all I had to present in this segment. Nirmalya sir, over to you.
Yes, Vaibhav, thanks for your insights. We want to go directly to the question answer session, the much awaited panel discussion with the experts. Again, a reminder to the audience that you please put in your questions on the chat box, and we would like to take up those questions with the experts who are having today's panel. So, Vaibhav, I will now request you to initiate the question answer session, please.
Okay, so my first question is to Tanveer sir. Post Supreme Court order, we have seen very much change in sales pattern in Karnataka. So, how has the share of auction and direct sales changed post Supreme Court orders?
Thank you, Abba. Initially, after May 2022, I think we were still continuing mainly through the auction route itself, because there was this period where I think the miners didn't know how to go about it because we had 10 years of auction, and then that auction was leading to the price discovery. And suddenly, when the auction started coming off for direct sales, we didn't know how to discover the prices, right? So, but I think we've come a far way from that. We are now, what we see is most of the iron ore fines is more or less being done directly, because you have the larger players who are taking in those fines, and most of those fines are being directly sold to these players. Lumps, I think today, large part of it is still being done through the e-auction. Of course, the public sector, KSMCL and NMDC are still following the auction route, but most of the private miners have shifted to direct sales, at least on the fines part. Lumps still largely happens on the auction route. I think the main reason being because the consumer lumps are more scattered. You have a lot number of players there, the sponge iron plants that are taking in 2,000, 5,000, 3,000 kind of smaller quantities. So that's still happening on the auction route.
So my next question is to Vignesh sir. A few leading Karnataka-based miners were planning to have LTAs with state-based plants for their iron ore sales. Sir, is there any update to it?
Yeah, of course, Vibhav, this is something, a good thing which has happened, I would say, the post the monetary committee regime. And because with the long-term agreement, there is a supply chain management can be planned properly. And of course, major PSU miner is doing it in an organized way. And there are other private miners also who are doing with an understanding of continued supplies, but I'm not very sure any formal contract as such are getting signed. But of course, yes, long-term supplies are happening now.
Okay, Tanveer sir, any take in this from your side?
No, I think like Mr. Vignesh said, there are no formal long-term contracts signed, but I think more or less the miners have started understanding the buying patterns of larger players who take in a subsequent quantity every month. So I think they are also planning their production, allotting certain quantities to buyer A, B, or C. And price, of course, there is no long-term pricing or long-term discussion happening on the price. Price is always going to be on spot with the way things are. But I think at least the quantity kind of flow is setting in. Will take some more time, but I think invariably that's the way we are heading.
Okay. Vignesh sir, my next question is for you only. Is price discovery of ore still an issue for Karnataka-based miners? We see that given the price gap between PSU and private miners these days.
Vibhav, I don't think so, because if you take example of this PSU miners also, the last couple of auction, both mines, KSMCL and NMDC, for that matter, the prices are at par with the other players. Meaning we have witnessed prices going up 1700 rupees, 1800 rupees, from the base price. So that way, I don't see price discovery is still an issue.
Nirmalya sir?
Yes, so yes, so Vignesh sir, actually the price discovery that we're talking about. So sorry, so it's still based on the majority of the spot transactions, and that is how the discovery is taking place. So are there any transparency issues in that?
No, sorry, last part of your question I missed.
Yes, so I was asking that as far as the price discovery transparency is concerned, are there any issues or concerns relating to that?
No, I don't think so. See, now, if you look at the e-auction or the sales pattern, which we discussed on the first question, which was also explained by Mr. Tanvir, um, earlier during the monitoring committee regime, 100% of the sales used to happen through the e-auction. So roughly about 2.5 million tons, 30 million tons per annum used to be the merchant sales through e-auctions. So now it has become 1.5 million tons. Still, the major chunk is again through e-auction, where NMDC and KSMCL are routing the 100% of their volume through e-auction, and the other minus partly fines and then largely lumps is also happening. And the price discovery was an issue, earlier, because the market was regulated. There was no market freedom. The export was not allowed, whereas imports were allowed. So there was a, market forces were not able to operate free, which is now eliminated. So at least we do not see any major price gap or the discovery part, even though the sales are happening on the direct sales basis, the prices are at par.
Uh,
Yes, yes. Thank you,
okay.
thank you, thank you for the answer. Yes, Vaibhav, you may please continue. Yeah, Vaibhav, you may please continue with your next question.
So my question is to Tanveer sir. Iron ore and pellet exports from southern India recently, Krishnapatnam and Mangalore ports have risen to 5.5 million ton during this period of Jan to November versus 1 million ton in the same period last year. So how do we see things going forward?
I am not very aggressive on how iron ore exports will happen, because I think we have quite a bit of shortage at the domestic industry itself. And I think whatever exports have happened was all cargo that was lying with a lot of these people who exported for a long time, and they found this avenue to sell their cargo. There will be exports. I'm not saying there will not be exports, but I think it is going to be very limited, and probably for cargo which is more viable towards closer to the port. And the government of Karnataka also is not very open, in the sense they're only the mine owner can export, right? You don't have traders coming in. So that way, I don't see the export quantity picking up for iron ore fines. Pellets, I think the domestic prices are still very good. There's a huge difference between, unless we see prices, FOB prices going above 150, 160, I don't think there will be an incentive for pellet exports to happen. We may see one-off here and there shipment due to some accumulation of stock or others, but I don't see a continuous export happening from Karnataka like the way it is from Orissa and other states.
Yes, Tanvi sir, so very interesting point. So one thing I would like to know from you, sir, of course, with pellets, of course, you talked about domestic realizations and exports. Now, but capacities are also growing very fast. I mean, not only in Karnataka, but in all over India. So, will we have enough domestic demand for that capacity, or do you see in the maybe in the mid to long term that exports of pellets are growing from Karnataka? What is your take on this?
So in the short term, which I'm saying is maybe about the next 2 to 3 years, I don't see a lot of exports happening and a lot of new capacities coming in. Capacities are, of course, being started now, which will take at least anywhere between 18 to 24 months, for those plants to commission and then start production, right? So 2 to 3 years, I don't think there's going to be a major change in supply of pellet situation within Karnataka. Once that happens, yes, there are plans on the anvil that are coming up. Once that happens, I think they could be an option. But for us, the logistics plays a very spoiled sport. The from Bellary or Hospet taking it to Krishnapatnam or Mangalore, we lose out on the logistic cost. So that way, until the prices are aggressively high, I don't think Bellary pellet manufacturers will find an incentive to export unless quantities increase double fold, which we're not seeing. I think we have about 1 or 2 plants that have more or less confirmed that are at advanced stages of implementation.
May I add something to what Mr. Tanvir said?
Sure.
Nirmalya?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So as far as the pellet is concerned, like he rightly pointed out, and also the comparison of 1 million to 5 million ton, I would say does not include pellet, because KOCL was the only pellet producer who was exporting, and even before the mining export ban, and even now, apart from KOCL from the southern state, none of the pellet producers are exporting. So as far as pellet is concerned, the situation remains the same. Of course, yes, the export of low grade has increased significantly, and the trend overall, what we see is the even earlier also we had this problem, this low grade ore, which was actually not finding the buyers in the domestic market, is now being directed to the export market. So I feel somehow this export of low grade ore will continue um, in the near term. Of course, pellets, I'm not saying at least for 1 or 2 years there may not be exports, but later on there is a possibility. Of course, the dynamics of the international markets also have to be seen.
Yes, and of course, Tanvi sir also made a very interesting point that about prices. So, do you see the situation improving? I mean, just a general question. This may not be specific to Karnataka, but just a general question that where do you see prices of pellet prices going from here, so that there will be an incentive for Karnataka, producers and miners to also export pellets. Vignesh sir, to you, and then maybe we can take Tanvi sir's opinion. Yes.
See, pellet prices, Nirmalya, if you have seen, even in the past also, the prices of Karnataka and the eastern sector has always been different, because the market or demand supply is different. Like, the pellets which are produced generally don't come here to Karnataka, and it is, either way, like it doesn't go from here. So it was always, a kind of a self-sufficient market in terms of pellet. So that way the prices remain, little bit on the higher side in Karnataka, the domestic market prices. Whereas in case of eastern sector, it is always on the export parity basis, because the supplies or the production capacities of Odisha is much higher. In fact, they were meant for exports largely. So in eastern segment, the market trades on the export parity basis, whereas here it is based on the domestic demand and supply.
Yes, Tanvi sir, your take on that?
I think like Mr. Vignesh said, currently the capacity of pellet that is there, I think, is self-sufficient for the domestic DRI. Most of the pellet is being sold to DRI, producers. And also there is a trend that is now growing, that you see a lot of these blast furnace units also trying to have pellet feed of about at least 20-25% coming in. So with that consumption level happening, I don't see the incentive, like I said before, for us to export pellet. I think we're quite happy with the way domestic market is. And once you have newer capacities coming in, then of course that's a different dynamic. And then depending on what the international market is at that time, we'll have to take a look.
Yes. So, of course, with the rising domestic DRI capacity, there is, of course, good domestic demand. Now, to stay on the same exports page, so what are the challenges that are being faced by exporters? If you could just Tanvi sir.
Uh, can you be more specific on that question, Nirmala? What exactly did you want to know?
I mean, relating to obtaining of licenses and all that.
So I think right now what's happening is whoever has a mine is allowed to export. They just don't want a lot of second, third, fourth kind of sales or changing hands, which some may argue that is a good thing because it keeps things in check. Some may argue is not a free market, so that's up for debate. So other than that, I don't think there's any other problems in exporting. Of course, we are an inland-based area, so of course the logistic part is always going to be against us because we'll and for you to be competitive, that becomes a major factor, right?
Yes, sir. And Vignesh sir, your take on that? So about obtaining of licenses for exports and all that. So what are the hurdles and how can they be overcome if there are any hurdles in the first place?
In terms of export license, as Mr. Tanvir said, apart from traders who are not able to get into the market, I do not see any major difficulty here in terms of the license. But of course, in terms of the infrastructure, logistics, which needs a lot of improvement, I would say the port. There are three port options for the Karnataka-based people: Krishnapatnam, Mangalore, and Goa. While the major chunk of quantity is routed through to Krishnapatnam, but Mangalore and Goa also, in terms of freight, it makes sense. But there are issues related to the port infrastructure, so which is a challenging part, I would say. But apart from that, I do not see any major issues. Nirmal.
Yes. Vaibhav, your question, please.
Thanks, Nirmala sir. My question is for Tanvi sir. Steel Mills has its pallet index for Bellary, which has risen to around 11,500 X works levels in September, before dropping to INR 10,000 X works in this previous month of November. So, sir, according to you, what factors had supported the price hike?
At that point when we saw from I think from June to September, what we saw was prices, auctions were not coming in. There was confusion as to whether we should do direct sales or go through the auction. There was a lull in the period, and I think a few mines were shut down because of logistic issues or other local issues. So at that time there was a shortage of iron ore that was there, right? So that a lot of people started. Then pellet was, of course, the preferred alternate supply that was there. So the demand for pellet started, and then that's how things. Iron ore became expensive because of shortage. That supposed pellet prices going high. But I think now we see things coming back into normal. Mines have opened up. Logistic issues are getting cleared out. And I think the mining companies have also kind of understood what the local market is. So they're able to have a better discussion across the table. First, that whole infrastructure had disappeared for 10 years, right? We never used to talk to a mine owner before. So now that we are talking there with them face to face, I think we are able to get into that market ecosystem now. And of course, adding to that, one point is at that time you see it is not only pellet, the steel prices were also higher, your TMT was higher, your billets were selling at a higher price. Sponge iron was at about 31,000 around that time. Today it's down to about 27,500, 28,000, right? So those are also the things that have impacted the price.
And we've also seen pellets coming from Asian sector because the prices were very high here, so it was making sense for them. And I think gradually, as the things streamlined here, things are in place now.
Vignesh, sir, just a follow-up question on this. His high grade was an issue, availability issue, because of which price hiked.
Yeah, of course, high grade was an issue, and even today it is an issue, Vibhav, in Karnataka. If you see, there are very few mines which has the high grade ore available. So there was a situation when especially during the September month, there was a problem, and then certain pellet plants also operated at a reduced capacity, meaning your demand was also high and on the supply was also very tight. It was all because of the iron ore. And even today, I would say the availability of high grade ore is less.
Sir, my next question is for you only, Vignesh sir. With increase in pellet exports from the state, are players keen on expanding their capacities?
As we spoke about in the exports, there were not significant increase in the exports from the southern states. KOCL used to do, and then they continue to do. But if you ask me in terms of the demand, of course, the demand is good because we are seeing addition of capacities in steel, in DRI. So the demand is good. Now the question is again, if you are adding the capacity, whether you will be able to meet your raw material requirement, which is iron ore basically. Because as we just talked, the high grade iron ore is not available, which is required for the pellet plant. So the low grade, then you need to beneficiate, and the beneficiation is not that easy. Like it is very expensive, and then it also comes with the concerns of your tailing management. So the overall, if you have to improve or if you have to meet the demand of the additional capacities which are going to come, or if at all we want further more and more additional capacities to come, uh, some kind of beneficiation plants need to come more. And I would say like a policy should facilitate some kind of an incentive to the beneficiation plants, so that the capacities can improve and the availability of high grade ore can be improved.
Yeah, a very interesting point that Vignesh sir made. Of course, we would like to learn a little more on this.
Yeah.
Uh, Number one is, of course, the unavailability of high grade ore or maybe depletion of high grade ore in Karnataka. So, how do you see the situation going forward? I mean, what is the scenario on this? I mean, how can we produce more of high grade iron ore? It may not be DR grade ore used for making DR grade pellets, maybe, but even for blast furnace grade, how do we, going forward, produce more high grade iron ore? What is the outlook on this in Karnataka?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, Nirmalya. Basically, when we say that the iron ore high grade availability is limited, it is not that Karnataka does not have a high grade ore. The existing mines which are currently operational are not able to produce the high grade. But if you see, the overall potential of Karnataka is very huge. If you talk on numbers like, when the CEC stopped iron ore mining in Karnataka, there were 166 leases, out of which 51 was categorized into C category, and remaining were categorized into A and B. So now, if you look at the numbers, the unauctioned mines is about 30, which are operational, and the C category or auctioned A and B category mines put together will be roughly about 10. So there are 40 leases currently are operational, meaning the number of leases I have mentioned 166. So it is roughly 25% of total number of leases which were there in Karnataka, say 12 years before. So the point here is like, it is not about the availability, it is about the utilization of the resources what is already available. How fast we are able to operationalize the mines, how fast we can make the clearances, how fast we can auction. So many mines were auctioned, 40-50 blocks are auctioned, but hardly 10 are running. They are stuck at many different stages. This is again the brownfield mining I'm talking about. If you leave this brownfield, that 166 mining leases which are operational now, which are to be operationalized yet, if you leave this aside, the OGP, which is obvious geological potential of Karnataka for iron ore alone, is 4,000 square kilometers as identified by Geological Survey of India. And in any of the states, if you see, this is the highest number. So you look at the potential. So what we require here in this particular state is basically, how we can expedite things, how we can increase the production, how we can operationalize the existing mines, how we can, auction the new blocks. So all these things have to be deliberated, and policy level changes are required, which is very, very important. You know, the major challenge is operationalizing and running a mine.
Yes, very nice point. I'll come to Tanvi sir with that also. Tanvi sir, so the geological potential and the reserves may be there, but there could be some problems about mining magnetite ore, because when we come to beneficiation, so magnetite has higher beneficiation potential, but there may be some environmental restrictions or hurdles going forward. So with the high grade ore thing, So, what kind of a regulatory push or what kind of an economic push is needed in order to gain self-sufficiency in high-grade ore? And going forward, because high-grade ore will have such great prominence in steel making, what is your outlook on this?
So the first point I think is completely agree with Mr. Vignesh. I think the push needs to be that most of these mines that are already identified needs to come into auction, and we need the number to increase. And auction happens, yes, but I think we need those mines to start within 6 to 9 months. That's where the key benefit comes in. Now the mines are taking an average of almost about 3 to 5 years happening, right? So that makes it very difficult. And also, I think some of the regulations in mining that has changed. Like earlier, you have different areas in the mine. Some area will have high grade, some area will have low grade. But with the more strict regulatory issues coming in, you can't divert from your mining plan, right? So if I've given a certain mining plan for this year, which may include based on my dump capacity and other things, because I'm following that, I have high grade ore, but I'm not able to mine it, right? So this is a fact of the future, and I think this is how we have to go. And beneficiation is going to be the reality of the future. We have to consume each and every lowest grade that is there, and for that way that to be done, we have to combine the high grade, low grade, and kind of find the right balance in that. So just having high grade, I think uh, it would not be right to say just because you have high grade, consume all the high grade. You can balance it out, use it in a very sustainable way. And I think the better mining is what is happening now.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, please carry on.
Yes, sir. My question is for Tanveer, sir. Apart from the incremental volumes from NMDC's Kumaraswamy mines post its EC enhancement, sir, do you foresee any additional supplies in the state?
So the additional supplies are there subject to, the other mines coming in. I think we have auction mines which are there, which are yet to start. And this thing, totally about 50, if you take the non-auction and auction mines, today we're at about 49.7 million tons of approved capacity, which is our cap. So the only way forward is the cap has to be increased. You have industry players increasing their steel capacities. The appetite for ore is just getting higher. We have a national goal of touching 300 million tons of steel. But on the raw material side, if you're going to keep targets and saying you can't produce more than 50 million tons and this, obviously it's going to be very difficult for us to meet those targets. So we have to increase the capacities. Even if new mines come in, 50 million tons is our existing capacity now. So that has to go to maybe 60, 70 million tons.
And this 50 million tons cap, which is I'm sorry to interrupt, this MPAP concept is very unique in Karnataka. If you go to any other iron ore producing states in the country, nobody has any such restrictions. Like it is only the EC. If you have EC, you can produce. But here, I don't know, certain things have been removed for the market freedom. But again, this is still there. Unfortunately, it is being continued, which needs to be removed.
Yes, now with we were saying that maybe the government and the authorities are thinking that let us not put a cap on iron ore mining in Odisha. Let production from Odisha happen as it is. So there is no need for a cap. So why in Karnataka? So Vignesh sir, do you think that there are certain things that are coming up like regulated the shadow of regulation that existed during the monitoring committee period and the court monitoring period, those things are still there. I mean, that is why hurdles are being created in mining and in increasing supplies.
Yeah, there are still remains of those regulations, I would say. Of course, the major part has been lifted, which is a free market. There is no restriction on export. There is no compulsion on doing only through the e-auction. So all those things have been removed. But again, this MPAP is a thing which was associated with that particular regulatory mechanism. Still remains. There are few other things as well, like SPV collection of SPV, whatever target was there, meaning almost it is now completed, that additional 10% which is charged for the development purpose. So that is also still there. So certain things are still there, requires more of fine tuning. in order to make the market similar to the rest of the markets in the country. And we are hopeful things are changing, so they should also hopefully should happen.
I think just to add to that one point, so we've I think for 10 years, the state machinery, the industry, the end users, I think we all have become so dependent on Supreme Court, right? Everything had to go to Supreme Court. Every decision had to come from there. So it's like we are learning to walk again. We have to go through that whole exercise and learn to do things independently. So I think it'll take some time, but I think we are seeing some positive changes. It will take some time, but it will invariably happen. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, of course, we'll come to Tanvi sir with the question on operationalization of mines and the problem with statutory clearances and all that. But Vignesh sir, my question to you first, that we had been discussing this about the problems with getting licenses and how exports maybe exporters are maybe facing a problem. So I just want to know from you, I mean, the real dynamics, that whether miners can get licenses automatically, or only traders need to take permission or something like that. So I mean, just we need some clarity on that.
Miners, like, not by default, but you'll have to apply for it and you get it. If you're a miner, there is no restriction. A miner can export, but the restriction is only for the traders. Yeah.
Traders. Yes. So do you see this is I mean, a short-term problem, which is maybe, I mean, hampering exports, or maybe this will this can, so I mean, like, not allowing traders to also export. So do you think this is a one-off or a short-term problem, or maybe it will ease going forward?
I'm not very sure, Nirmalya, how whether it is going to be short term or long term, but this is based on the guidelines which was issued by the state, after removal of this earlier monitoring committee regime, and this was part of it. And Karnataka, even during that monitoring committee period, also was very particular about selling the iron ore only to the end users, and the traders were not allowed. So I think it is a policy level matter. I'm not very sure like how it is going to change, whether it is going to be for short term or long term. But as Mr. Tanvir said, for in some other question, that it's a topic of debate whether it should be allowed or not, traders should be allowed or not. It has its own advantages and disadvantages, but I do not have any clarity of the time period.
Yes, Vaibhav.
Okay, so my question is for both the sirs. Although you, but first to Tanvi sir, although you spoke earlier briefly that we heard that total 40 iron ore block auctions have been witnessed since 2016. So sir, how many are operational currently, and what are the challenges being faced by the miners for getting the clearances?
I think you'll be able to correct me on that. I don't know exactly how many are. Have 40 been auctioned?
Yes. Sir, as per our data, since 2016, 40 blocks have been auctioned.
I think out of
40, yeah.
So I think out of that, operational are, I think, about
10.
12 or 13, I think, between 10 and 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a list of 10. I think apart from this, another 1 or 2 have started. So about 10 or 12 is what is operational. So the biggest issue, I think, is still at the policy level itself. I think the governments, both central and state, need to understand they have a lot of queries on C category mines, and then those queries keep coming back to the winning bidder, right? The winning bidder has nothing to do with that. I mean, he has won the mine. It's a fresh mine for that winning bidder, and whatever clearances, that's an internal issue with the government. So I think these things just need more clarification. And at state and central level also, I think those clarities between the concerned ministries have to be cleared. So I think that will kind of help. Main delays are towards, I think, your forest and environmental approvals. That is the biggest delay what's happening. And then I think one option that we were looking at, and I think suggestion also was made, is having some kind of a land bank for the CA land, because that's where the major delay is happening from for everyone. So I think some issues like these and some policy changes on this would kind of give a huge push for these mines to come on track.
Vignesh sir?
Vaibhav, I think most of the points are covered by Mr. Tanvir, and if you see the most of the mines which are stuck, getting operationalized is largely because of the forest clearance. That is where things are stuck because, of course, the CA land is a major issue, and apart from that, there are many conditions. You will find around 60 plus conditions, and even for FC transfer. It takes about 5 years. So then you imagine about getting a new FC. We had a conference in Bangalore, FIMI, in the month of October, and these things were discussed in detail. Um, Somehow, like the different departments are working in silos. That's what I would say. They are on their own, pace and doing at the things, but ultimately, people have to be aligned, like what is required, and the procedural. Meaning it is bureaucratic. If you see the way the rules are framed and the way the files moves from one table to the other table and the number of levels, it's not that easy. So we'll have to relax all those things, and ease of doing business has to improve a lot, especially on the mining sector. The mining sector has always been, I used to say in lot of different conferences also, but it is still there. It's a pain point, but it is a fact that it is being treated discriminately. It is a it is not treated like any other industry in the country, where the policy makers encourage and then make the way easy to increase the production. But here it is a different way. Things are very complicated. As miners, and now again steel producers also becoming the miners, they want to produce more and increase the steel production, but again things are not favorable. So a lot of policy level changes are required. um, and different ministries coming into place, and then everybody working on their own terms, and then in silos things are becoming complicated.
I think ideally, if I can just add to that, is I think like this, we've had this discussion in various conferences and suggestions made to the concerned governments as well. Is since the government is auctioning, right? If you can come into a process where all the clearances, at least the base clearances, are there, then it becomes much easier for the bid winner, right, to kind of get on the land and other things they can sort out. But it should be like a single window, because this is the mine, you've already done the due diligence, this is the capacity that this can mine, all these approvals are already given. Now you do the other approvals and start. This should start, I think, then this will help us start mines within 3 to 6 months of auctions getting concluded, and that will be a huge improvement.
Yeah,
if that happens.
Yeah, well, sir, actually, we are running behind the clock, so just a few quick questions. One question that we have from the audience, of course, is waiting for some time. We should ask it. That it's to both of you. What are the difficulties?
Uh,
no, I could not hear you, Nirmala. If you could repeat.
So, yeah, am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
So, how do you meet requirements for high-grade ore fines, as import is not cost effective?
Imports are not cost effective, I agree, but we still see some imports coming from the other states. So I don't know, meaning there is no logic to it, but it happens. But again, the availability of high grade ore, I think we have discussed at length. One is of course the beneficiation plants. The that is the major, I would say, the driver under the current circumstances, which can immediately increase the availability of high grade ore. And the second part of it, again, operationalizing the mines, and then identifying exploration. The exploration spent of the government, somehow I feel, is very low. Like out of OGP, hardly maybe 10 to 15% is what is explored. So there could be good amount of high grade ore available, but we are not aware. So the exploration also need to improve a lot. So I think all these three things answers the question.
Sorry. Yes, and Tanvi said also, because when the exploration point was touched, that we were seeing that I know blocks getting auctioned, which have very low grades. So, what is the importance of exploitation in this context, and how can we do that?
Nirmala, so I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? I think I lost you towards the end.
Yeah, so during the auctions also we were seeing that very low grade ore blocks containing low grade ore was auctioned. So going forward, what is the need for exploration and how can it be boosted?
I think those points Mr. Vignesh has already covered, and I totally agree with him. And I think that's more or less better exploration. And I think the other major in the short term, what has happened is a lot of the mines which are producing high grade ore and bringing it to the market, their lease has expired, right? So now they've either come back for auction or should be auctioned and restart. So until that happens, we have that gap that's built up, right? You had like your PBS, MSPL, and Vasinkeria Iron Ore Mine. These were the major suppliers of high grade ore that was coming into the market. Now they've gone in for re-auction. Re-auction has happened until it starts, and that gap is filled. We'll see in the short term that we will have this issue with high grade ore being available in the market.
Yes, and one last question to both the experts. Iron ore price outlook in Karnataka for the coming quarter. So we will start with Vignesh sir.
No, outlook wise, I would say is positive because the demand is good and the supplies are intact. So more or less, it should remain stable.
Yeah, and Tanvi sir.
I think the prices are, there's not going to be a major difference than where we are today. A little bit of plus or minus will happen depending on the market supply demand situation and how ultimately what the steel prices are. But the supply is pretty much, more or less saturated in the sense whatever is being produced is being consumed immediately. I don't think there's any excess capacity available. So I don't see a reason for prices to decrease immediately. The only way that will happen is with newer capacities coming in. Or unless the steel market tanks and it just becomes so unviable. Other than that, yeah, we just the best solution I think for all of us is new capacities coming in or existing capacities being increased.
Yes, so of course we can't fall beyond the level because supplies are also a concern. Yes, thank you so much both of you. We are running short of time, so I don't think we have time to accommodate more questions for our experts in today's panel. So before we sign off, of course, a big thank you to both the experts for sharing their valuable insights with us, and also to the audience for their very wholehearted participation and perceptive questions. Of course, we look forward to more such enlightening sessions in the future. And a big thank you to our experts and to my co-moderator.
Thank you, and thank you to SteelMint for having this and helping us learn a lot more about our industry.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure attending this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.